Hello, boys and girls. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, so listen to this. Ozzy Osbourne passed away. It was pretty obvious that it could have happened even during the concert, back to the beginning, but it didn't. Surprisingly, so I thought that even maybe they might like jokingly fuck with people, and he would like stage like maybe an explosion or something. Like I thought that they might do a mock Aussie death, but I guess they just really wanted to keep things respectable and prank free for the benefit of the fragile people out there watching. And yeah, it was all about charity. Supposedly, who knows how much money Sharon pocketed. I'm sure she made a percentage, as well as the Aussie Inc. family. But regardless, it was a great show. And the thing that I want to talk about is that I've noticed that a lot of conservative people, Republicans, and Fox News made sort of like pieces or tributes, and they talked about it like Ozzy should never be on Fox News, and they did that because they know a lot of their fan base, the Republicans, all watch Fox News religiously. It is a cult because they refuse to watch anything else. They refuse to do any sort of studies, researches. They refuse to read about history, facts, and they just shut their ears and they just like plug them with manure and only listen to Fox News narrative, which is it is propaganda. It is a cult. It is incredibly dangerous, but that's how powerful the government is, and the Republican people are, because they have been fed this narrative that immigration, poor people, and all that jazz, they're all responsible for the situation, the financial crisis, and the hardship in America. Instead of the obvious, like everybody else in the world knows that it's a mass hypnosis by millionaires and modern day now billionaires, because that's how they got to be billionaires, by manipulating a huge swath of society and feeding them the lies that their hardships and their whole financial problems and situations is by immigrants coming into the country. And they never talk about how a lot of corporations simply sold a lot of American corporations to the exterior. They sold companies out and they moved them to international countries where labor is a lot cheaper. Whatever prime material is more attainable and easy, just cheaper. So they sold so many American lives out, and they made the country poor. And now, like, Trump wanted to come in and say, hey, we're going to bring them all back. But guess what? You can't bring them back. It's too late. There's no real rational ability for an American company, any manufacturing company, to come back after the decades of non-existence due to Republicans, and I'm sure some Democrats were for it, or they were bribed to go for it, because that's all it is. America is just one big corrupt entity. You can pretty much bribe anyone, even with supposed high morals, or people that start out in politics with high morals and ethics and all that good stuff. they eventually cave in, if not by bribes, by threats, and in a lot of cases, which we just saw with Minnesota, with murder. If you hold out to your ethical and moral ethics too long, you are subject to a mysterious, accidental unaliving. You know, sometimes it's not mysterious because some culprits are found, but how these people come into being is one part mental illness and another part corruption, bribery, brainwashing. And this has been the situation in America for a long time. But I digress. Back to Aussie, and heavy metal culture in itself has always been a sort of a institution for enlightenment. They have been, just regular working blue collar folks, just trying to get ahead and make things happen for them. And they obviously run into all these roadblocks that are put there in place by millionaire corporations, heads of them, the heads of CEOs and billionaire entities that are for suppressing the working class. And this has been going on for quite a number of decades, especially after World War II. And they realized that war equals profit, and every couple of years a war somewhere on the world has to be waged in order to keep the machine well oiled. And in turn, they keep people down, they keep education low, they keep information out of the loop. There's a lot of heroes that have come and gone or are still in hiding because they call this corrupt, evil system out. It's always been around with us, like since the dawn of corporate America. But getting back to heavy metal and Ozzy, Black Sabbath, and the whole hippie against the war situation in the 60s really enlightened people and brought forth a new consciousness in society. And everybody started to realize that all these wars and all this manipulation is really something that should be talked about, something that should be fought against. And that's where heavy metal really came in. Heavy metal was grounded in the beliefs that there is a mass manipulation, especially in culture, arts, music, what have you, and probably television and movies. Everything's geared towards keeping the majority of society in the dark and into just accepting the narratives that are forced upon them on television. Even though there was a lot of dissent from journalists and entities that were against the war, against religion, against oppression of minorities, and all the financial institutions, all the corporate heads that were trying to manipulate society to such a degree where everything was just whitewashed. And you had revolution from both the female camp and the blacks with Malcolm X, and then you had the hippie movement that turned dark and said it's not enough for us to wear flowers in our head, in our hair, and protest peacefully, because violence always wins. Whoever has the arms, whoever has the military power, will always overpower the people that don't. And that's when things started getting gray and dark and ugly. And then you had bands like Black Sabbath, you had bands like MC5 and Blue Cheer, and a plethora of movements, like even Jimi Hendrix and people that were vehemently anti-war and anti-politics, and they were calling all the politicians in power. They were calling them geriatric, incontinent, uh, just greedy, parasitic leeches and manipulators. And that's where heavy metal came from. And then, fast forward later on, a couple of years in the 80s, and you had bands like Dead Kennedys, or in the 70s, you had bands like Crass, you had Sex Pistols. Everything was more and more political because the manipulation of society was just getting worse and worse. And it just was pretty obvious to people with a brain that things were headed in the wrong direction. And it really did seem like, Orwell and Brave New World and 1984, and everything was starting to creep into political avenues. And you had Reagan, which spawned bands like DRI and other hardcore and even thrash metal descendants. And we had to all fight against this whole agenda that was just keeping people down. There was like drugs coming in and being manufactured in order to get like ghettos, people in the ghettos from advancing in society or becoming politicians or becoming people of influence. And then all these prisons started popping up, and which a prison in itself is basically a concentration camp. And sure, there were criminals, but criminality is all a product of poverty, and that's what the elite class was perpetuating into society. They were like, we have too many people, too many poor people, and there's a lot of descendants that could possibly take over and eat us for dinner, and we need to find a way to keep these people down. Let's build more prisons. Let's even privatize prisons. And the show goes on. So it's really ironic to me when I see all these Republican, hillbillies, rednecks, whatever you want to call them, and they're all for heavy metal music. And like, it doesn't compute, because obviously heavy metal was born as an anti-Republican, anti-millionaire class, anti-elite class. Ozzy even sang about, war pigs, and Crazy Train has like, learn how to love, forget how to hate, and let's all get together and let's unify. And guess what? What did the elite do? They demonized heavy metal music. They demonized everything to do with heavy metal, and heavy metal is just a retort to all this corporate billionaire, millionaire manipulation in society, and the whole prison system and the whole like suppressing society. Instead of being for education, educate your populace, make college free, help people out of poverty, and do what's right in society, and invest in your people. But no, like, what they wanted to do is just suppress people, make a profit, and then keep it going, and just make it worse and worse for anyone to survive, unless they come from the elite class and they have tons of millions. And even the mob was getting ahead because they had the money, so politicians endorsed the mob. They enforced anything possible to suppress the poor people, even if they're as rational and as gifted and as a genius as they could be. It's like, if you don't have money, you belong in the street and you belong on crack and you belong in prison. So when I see Fox News and Republicans try to, mourn Ozzy Osbourne and give their respects, and like, no, you can't do that, because you have always been against heavy metal's ideologies, Ozzy's ideology, Black Sabbath's ideology. It's like you don't understand, or you don't want to understand, that heavy metal is a force against greed and perpetual idiocy and the whole suppression and oppression of rational society. You are for enslavement. Listen to Napalm Death, from enslavement to obliteration. That is the whole Republican MO. All over the world, this is what they want. They don't want people to be educated anywhere in the world. They don't want people to be rational. They want people to suffer and enslave themselves for profit, and keep and human consciousness at a low level, low vibration, where true utopian ideals and true progress doesn't have a platform, because it's all about greed and oppression. That's the way it's always been. So I don't want to see any more of you redneck Republican assholes saying anything positive about Ozzy, your experiences, because you obviously did not get the message. And you obviously are total morons, and you're proud of it, just as long as you get to be racist and get off on that, instead of actually thinking, actually being aware of the world, its history, and its manipulation. It's all it's a show, and you fall for it, and you praise it, and you worship it, because you've been so lied to that you choose to, instead of educating yourself, you choose to just embrace it because it feels good to hate. It pains you to learn anything. It pains you to actually understand what it is to be a human being living in this realm, in this reality. You choose to worship lies and empty promises, and you never learn. So you can all fuck off. Sincerely. Keep Ozzy's name out of your motherfucking mouths.